And this talk that I'm going to give today, I think it may be my most important talk ever. And I'm hoping that maybe by the end of the lecture, you'll say, yes, this was the most important talk I've ever heard. Maybe. Can be optimistic. So let me explain the title. So let's start with Texas. So in February of 2021, we had a winter storm, a cold wave. If you look at the geography of the United States, there's a mountain chain in the east, Appalachian, and then you have the Rockies on the west. In between, there is what the so-called the Great Plains. And sometimes we have cold air coming from the Arctic and rolls all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And we can have suddenly, usually Texas is hot and humid, Houston is hot and humid, but we can have temperature dropping below freezing. And the power failed because the power producing facilities could not withstand the cold. If power failed, eventually water failed. It was a miserable week, but it's not just miserable. I mean, it cost almost $300 billion in property damage, and over 700 people died. It was a total disaster. Another disaster, you may remember this happened in 2018 and 19. The Boeing 737 MAX, two different airlines, both crashed, almost 350 people died. In each case, it was something called MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristic Augmentation System fail. I'll come back to it later. But was a catastrophic, two crashes, lots of people. Boeing had a reputational damage. They followed up. They had other thing happened to Boeing. Boeing not clear Boeing can recover from this. And of course, we are just barely coming out from the biggest disaster in our lifetime, COVID-19. And we think of COVID-19, first of all, as a public health crisis. You may remember a couple of years ago, we were all watching the dashboard, how many people are in the hospital, how many people have died. But COVID-19 was much more than just a public health crisis. In the United States in particular, and I'll come back to it, it was an economic crisis. What you see here is not the Disneyland parking lot. What you see here are people waiting in their car for a food bank to go to get some food to put on the table. We had over 25 million people did not have food because many businesses had to close and people didn't get paid. And now, if they don't get paid, they can't afford to buy food. And if you look at the date, you know, end of November, there is an important holiday in the United States, Thanksgiving holiday. And you have millions of people going to a food bank just to put food on the table. It was also a social crisis. You know, there was the George Floyd, who was really murdered by the police, and we started protests and riots, and it's not directly related to COVID-19, but partly it was a whole atmosphere of agitation that caused one incident to blow up and to have like a national crisis. And not to mention the political crisis that happened around. We can debate how it's related. What you see here, the January 6, 2021 insurrection. So this was really very, very difficult few years that we went through. And one question that people ask is, why were we not ready? So some people say, how can you get ready for what they call black swan events? You know, things can happen. How can you get ready for every possible event? But the answer is that there were warnings. Here you see President Obama meeting with science advisor to talk about preparation for a possible swine flu pandemic. There were warnings that a pandemic is coming. 2006, during the George W. Bush administration, the Secretary of Health and Human Services is giving briefing to Congress about preparing for the pandemic flu. So there are plenty of warnings that the pandemic is coming. Nevertheless, we were not ready. So let's try to understand why we were not ready. And let's talk about what was going on in the beginning. So March 2020, a popular phrase became flatten the curve. So at the beginning, there was no vaccine, no nothing. There was no way to really stop the infection. Now, usually when you have a pandemic, it goes like a bell. It infects people. Eventually, the virus runs out of people to infect, and then it goes down. And people argue, no, we need to flatten the curve. Why was it so important to flatten the curve? Because hospital system could not cope with a sudden huge rise in number of cases. In particular, there were 2 points that were flash points. One was northern Italy, another one New York City, and the hospitals were at the breaking point. Here is a headline from a newspaper in April 2020. Nurses are wearing garbage bags as they battle coronavirus. It is something like out of Twilight Zone because there are not enough PPEs. Anybody remember what is a PPE? Personal protective equipment. And of course, the medical staff didn't want to get infected. If they get infected, the hospital will collapse. So there were not enough PPEs. We couldn't get, I ended up, I remember, buying masks from China. We couldn't get masks in the United States. You have to buy them from China. And in March 2020, an economist, William Galston, wrote a column in the Wall Street Journal that opened my eyes. And the column was titled, "Efficiency is not the only economic virtue." And he wrote, what if the relentless pursuit of efficiency, which has dominated American business thinking for decades, has made the global economic system more vulnerable to shocks? And he said, efficiency comes through optimal adaptation to existing environment, while resilient is the capacity to adapt to changing environment. Resilience, dictionary definition, the ability to recover readily from illness, depression, adversity, or the like. So we have efficiency wants us to be optimized for what the current environment, while resilience requires that we are ready for changes. And he said, businesses are focusing all on efficiency, and they're not thinking at all about resilience. So let's take an example, just-in-time manufacturing, also called lean manufacturing. So there's a computer company called Dell that started in the 1980s, and maybe you have Dell equipment. Dell has never been an innovator. I mean, you can think, what is the big innovation come out of Dell? No. They're a very, very efficient manufacturer. And basically, they realized that the normal manufacturing, you get parts, you put them in a warehouse, and from the warehouse, you ship them to the manufacturing line. So you need to build a warehouse, you need to put things in the warehouse, getting out of the warehouse, and while the parts are sitting in the warehouse, they're not making any money. So just-in-time says, forget the warehouse, no warehouse. We will get the parts to arrive directly to the factory floor, just when they are needed, just in time. So this is, if you're able to do it, it's very, very efficient because you eliminate all the costs of having a warehouse. But you assume best case logistics. If there's any interruption, the line has to stop because you don't have the parts. So you have no resilience. And in fact, one of the things that did happen during the pandemic was supply chain disruption. This is a picture that I took in a Costco. It's a big warehouse-style grocery store in the United States. This is the paper product section, and you see the shelves are bare. And famous, Wall Street Journal, we can't even get paper towels. And I think that they really want to say toilet paper, but they thought it was not dignified to put toilet paper in a headline in a Wall Street Journal. Why? Blame lean manufacturing. A decades-old effort to eke out more profit by keeping inventory low left many manufacturers unprepared when COVID-19 struck, and production is unlikely to ramp up significantly anytime soon. And you may remember there was all discussion about the supply chain crisis because one boat was steered in the wrong direction in the Suez Canal, got stuck in the Suez Canal. One boat, one idiot, and world shippings grind to a halt. Think about it. Which the same thing happened now in Baltimore. One boat goes into a bridge, and poof, we have a worldwide crisis. And the same thing, hospitals were overwhelmed. Why did COVID overwhelm hospitals? Wall Street Journal, a years-long drive for efficiency. Health systems have kept a tight rein on employee numbers and expanded outpatient care, helping their finances make them less prepared for medical crisis. It costs money to be prepared. Let's not waste money. The pandemic hit very hard nursing homes. Lots of elderly people died in nursing home. And again, this is Business Week. Cost cutting at American nursing home made COVID-19 even worse. Industry could have done more to stop the virus. Again, a drive for efficiency. Now, let's come back. What happened in Texas? We started with the storm. So why did so many power stations fail? Well, the argument is there was a lawsuit against ERCOT is a body in Texas, Electric Reliability Council of Texas, and there was a class action against them, and the answer was that the suit claimed you did not prepare. Everybody knew that we can have cold weather, below freezing weather in Texas. You should have kind of fortified the power production station. They did not do it. Eventually, the lawsuit lost because ERCOT turned out is a government body, and you cannot sue the government. But it doesn't mean that they were not negligible. And you can go and find it. You remember the financial crisis in 2008. And people ask, wait a minute, Wall Street, what is the main business of Wall Street? It's risk management. These are the people that know about risk. Investing is all about risk management. How come, what happened to Wall Street? And there was an article that opened my eye years ago, the formula that killed Wall Street. We are not going to go into this Gaussian copula function. But yeah, they do risk management. And this formula tries to tell you what is value at risk. You want to know, okay, I want to know with probability, let's say, 99.9%, I will not lose more than, let's say, who knows, I don't know, I make a number, $10 billion, because I know I can withstand the loss of $10 billion. The problem is, what happens in the 0.01%? How much money would you lose then? What will happen then? So during normal time, this formula worked really well. But during a crash, when there was a financial crisis, the formula failed. Turned out Wall Street had no resilience. And we almost had a Great Depression. And remember the millions of people waiting for food? How come so many people didn't have food? This was well known. This is data from 2016. Nearly half of Americans would have trouble finding $400 to pay for an emergency. They have no savings. Something happened. They need to have a break job. They don't have the money. If you're going to a $1,000 unexpected expense, 2/3 of Americans. That means if you have a problem with your car, and many American people commute to work. So if there is a problem with your car, you don't have money to repair it. You can go to work. You may lose your job. Lose your job, you may lose your house. In 2020, when the crisis became very clear, The Atlantic wrote an article, it didn't have to be like this. The desperation of US workers in the aftermath of the coronavirus was the product of a series of policy decisions and missed opportunities. There was a kind of a implicit decision that we can let Americans live on the edge, which is efficient but not resilient. So let's go back to see how nature handled this tension between efficiency and resilience. This was an article in Communication of the ACM. I was then the editor-in-chief. I chose the title, Sex as an Algorithm. I love this title. And we chose the color pink, offended some people. It's pink, it's a color, come on. But it's a very serious article. It's about the theory of evolution under the lens of computation. And it was written by Adi Livnat and Christopher Dimitriou. Christopher Dimitriou is a luminary computer scientist. And they asked the following question. So if you look at nature, then most animals use sexual reproduction. But you look at bacteria, for example, they use just mutations. And so this corresponds to two different optimization algorithms. So mutation corresponds to simulated annealing. And sexual reproduction corresponds to genetic algorithms. Because crossbreeding between chromosomes. Now, experience has shown that simulated annealing is more efficient than genetic algorithms. So why did nature choose an inefficient algorithm? We can say it's more fun, but nature doesn't care about that, okay? So what's going on? They want to look at an explanation, why is sexual reproduction so prevalent in nature. And they have an answer. It's not about efficiency. What sexual reproduction does, it creates a more genetically diverse species. So if there is a change in the environment, because there is more diversity, some organism will fail, but the species will survive. So if we want species to survive, that means we want resilience of the species, then we need genetic diversity, and this is where sexual reproduction does a better job than mutation. So in some sense, you can say that nature had to consider the trade-off between efficiency, which is short-term optimization, and resilience, which is long-term optimization, and nature focused on long-term. Why? Survival. So what is survival of the fittest? Darwin already said. He said, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. An example about the dinosaurs were perfectly for their environment, but then it became colder, and the dinosaurs cannot survive. They were not adaptable. So adaptability, which is give you resilience, is more important than efficiency. And this is, to me, one picture that captures it. What you see here are two beams from pine wood. At the top, you see genetically modified pine. At the bottom, you see natural pine. So genetically modified pine, what is the idea? Let's make it grow much faster, because then we can get it from the forest to market faster. So you see it grows much faster, so you have fewer rings. So it is GM pine is more efficient. But under stress, which beam would hold longer? The natural pine, because you have much more strength, because you have many, many more layers. This is, to me, a perfect example how the quest for efficiency comes at the expense of resilience. Now let's go back, take a look at our own discipline, computer science. I don't know if everybody is a computer scientist. This is generally will be non-technical. There are a few technical slides, but if you find them a little baffling, don't worry, I will not be too technical. So let's look at computer science. Let's look at a book that's close to our Bible, okay? The Art of Computing Programming, a book that was published first in the 1960s by Don Knuth, who is the closest we have to patron sense in computing. And what is it about? It's about the analysis of algorithm. So what analysis of algorithm? Open Wikipedia. In computer science, the analysis of algorithm is the process of finding the computational complexity of algorithm, the amount of time, storage, or other resources needed to execute them. So this book is all about efficiency. Efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. Now, in 2013, David Ackley looked at sorting algorithms. So sorting algorithm is one of the earliest algorithms. You teach an algorithm called computer science, you start with sorting, and you show the students different sorting algorithm. There's bubble sort, there's merge sort, there's quick sort. And you start to focus on efficiency. And you show them that bubble sort is very inefficient because it does quadratic number of comparison, both in the worst case and the average case. Merge sort is very efficient. It does only n log n comparison. Quick sort is kind of in between. And David Ackley asked, what happens if a comparison operation can make error? He said, let's suppose that 10% of the comparison, the answer is random. So 50% on such a, in 10%, so 5% of the comparison will be wrong. You'll get the wrong result. What will be the quality of the sorting? So he did simulations to see the final list, how close it is to be perfectly sorted. And the amazing thing he discovered is that bubble sort was robust. It provided you almost a perfectly sorted list. Merge sort and quick sort were not. And why is that? Why was bubble sort, which we typically think is a bad algorithm, why was it robust? Because it does more comparison, it had more chance to correct its own errors. So we'll come back to it. Redundancy, we'll come back to redundancy as a fundamental principle of resilience. Another famous algorithm, the birth of the modern, in some of the modern web, is an algorithm called PageRank, which was invented by Larry Page in the 90s at Stanford University. And the question was, when you do a search on the web, how to rank the results. And some people may remember, old enough to remember the days before Google search, and you got the result, but you have to look at the first page and the second screen and another page until you find high-quality result. And then Google came out, and it was magic. The top link is usually what you're looking for. And what was the idea? The idea was very, very fundamental idea, which is if many web pages point to your web page, then your web page must be important. If many important web pages point to your web page, it must be very important. If many very important web pages point to your web page, it must be very, very important. And then now you develop a nice mathematical theory. It has to do with eigenvalue and random walks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we got suddenly, Google was launched because you can click, I feel lucky, and get one link, and it's the right link. But very quickly, people discovered, wait a minute. So if I start, I don't know, a Mexican restaurant here in Sofia, and I want people to find it when they search for Mexican food, what will I do? I'll create lots of fake websites. They'll all point at each other. They'll become important. They'll point at my restaurant, and my website will float to the top. And this has become a business, search engine optimization. And so it turned out that the page algorithm was very non-resilient. And people found a way, essentially, to defy it. And the patent, in fact, the patent has expired, but you know, already like 15 years ago, I asked Google if they're willing to publish a paper on search quality. And they say, no, it has to be trade secrets. As soon as we publish the result, people will figure out how to outsmart, how we do it. People will figure out a way around it. So we don't know how they do it. It's a trade secret. So this is a nice example of the trade-off, again, between page algorithm was very efficient, not resilience. I'll take a classical concept in computer science, probably approximately correct. Many people was popularized by Leslie Valiant about pack learning. But the concept was introduced by Stockmeyer almost more than 40 years ago about how to do randomized algorithms that approximate difficult computation. And the idea is there are two parameters. One is you want the error not to be more than epsilon, and you want the confidence in the result to be at least delta. And that became a very, very popular concept. What Stockmeyer did not ask, what happened with probability 1 minus delta? How big is the error going to be? And you say, okay, it's only 1%. Remember what happened on Wall Street. That error, even though it's only 1%, if it's a very large error, it changes the expectation. So a few years ago, together with collaborators, we defined strong pack. It's not enough that you have a bound on error and a bound on confidence. You want the expectation to be correct, and that gives you resilience. So this is just a few examples how we can even start taking concept in computer science that we thought always in terms of efficiency, and then a new dimension, resilience. But I want to look at other aspects beyond algorithm. Take the concept of friction. You rarely hear about friction in computer science. The concept does not exist. Nobody talks about friction. In fact, we think of friction as a bad thing. You look at Facebook, in the early days, Mark Zuckerberg talked about what is the goal of Facebook? Frictionless sharing. A decade ago, I wrote, our discipline is dedicated to reducing friction. Latency must be eliminated. Bandwidth must increase. Ubiquity should be universal. Our goal is to reduce the friction of computing communication as much as possible. So what happened, for example, with Facebook? The fact that there is no friction gave us a dystopia. You know, we have filter bubble, fake news, extreme content, and a part of the answer is it's just too easy to share. It's just one click. And in fact, what do you click more? Boring content or exciting content? A dragon has been seen flying over Sofia. Ooh, amazing. Click, share. So we're all being manipulated by this, it's so easy to click, too easy to click. But the phenomenon that reducing friction is bad, you can find other instances. For example, in 2010, in 5 minutes, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 600 points, eliminating valuation of $1 trillion. In 5 minutes, $1 trillion, poof, evaporated. I mean, they had to stop trading because it was going to continue to go down. And then they did an investigation later, what happened? So today there is something called high frequency trading, which is committed to reducing friction in trading. Let's make computers that are fast. Let's make sure we have high bandwidth communication line. So when you push the button to execute a trade, it will be executed within microseconds. So what happened? You decide to sell, somebody else gets a signal, they sell, and suddenly you have an avalanche of sell order, and poof, the whole market comes down because there's no friction. As you should by now know, whatever you remember from physics, you should know, systems without frictions are very unstable. And in fact, even economists, Thomas Peterffy, one of the people that developed it, says, there was a point to some efficiency, but after that, this whole race for faster and faster trading has no value. Other people call it a flawed market design. We have gained efficiency, but we have lost resilience. And I'll give you an example from personal affairs. So there is an app called Tinder. I'm just a theoretician in the concept. I never use it, but I've read about it. And it's very easy to find matches. You see a picture. If you like, you swipe right. If you don't like, you swipe left, and you find matches. In 2010, Jenna Beard, this caught my eye in the Washington Post. She asked, why is it so hard to take a Tinder date and turn it into a relationship? She said, I have lots of dates, but I can't find a relationship. What's going on there? And in fact, this has been confirmed by, this was a personal essay, but this has been confirmed by academic studies. The people that meet online are less likely to form a stable relationship. And so psychologists ask what's going on. And the answer is, it's just too easy. When it's too easy, nobody feels, well, I've made a big investment in it. I should really try to get something out of it. And in fact, there is a famous country song. It's called Easy Comes, Easy Goes. And the line is, no hard feeling, darling, no regrets. If it was too easy, oh, well, there will be another date. So it's no big deal if I lose this one. So eliminating friction is not good for us. In fact, you can imagine, we have an engineering quad at Rice, and just across from me, on the diagonal of the quad, there is a mechanical engineering department. Imagine that I go there and I meet some of my engineering college and tell them, on the other side of the quad, in computer science, we think friction is bad. You guys should do the same. You should eliminate all friction. They look at me and they say, you're out of your mind. It depends where. The tires on the road, I want high friction, right? In the drive shaft, I want low friction. So the friction is good or bad? It's not good or bad. It depends on the context. You have to have the right amount of friction in the right place at the right time. And we don't have this sensibility in computing. We just say friction bad, friction bad. And we get this, we get loss of resilience because of that. So David Ackley called this phenomenon, he called it CEO software. He said we are focusing on correctness, it has to do the right thing, and efficiency. But we don't talk about robustness, which is the ability to withstand disruption. We don't talk about resilience, which is the ability to recover from failure. He said this is too narrow. You cannot just focus on this measure. And at the very, very end, I'll have an amazing kind of demonstration of these ideas. So we can go back and look, for example, what happened with the 730 MAX. So we now understand what happened there. Boeing built more efficient jet engines. But designing a new airframe is very, very expensive. So they said, why don't we use the old frame for the 737? We'll put on it new engines. But you took an old airframe, new engines, it was unstable. They said, not a problem. The automatic pilot will correct for the instability. It's hard for pilots to react very quickly when you have instability. The automatic pilot will do it. So they designed an automatic pilot. It was called data-centric control loop. But you need to sense what's going on. They said, one sensor should be enough. So they built a system based on one sensor. When that one sensor failed, the automatic pilot didn't have data, so it failed. It told the pilot, okay, you're in charge. The pilot, whoa, we have no idea. We've been drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. Suddenly you want us to fly the plane. So 2 planes crashed. So it was overly optimized, both for fuel economy and for time to market. The New York Times called it a saga of capitalism gone awry. How by focusing so much on efficiency, at the end of the day, you're going to, the cost to not only, I'm not talking about the cost of life, but the cost of Boeing. I don't know if Boeing ever will recover from that, especially since it turned out that this culture demonstrated itself again and again. You know, falling bolts, all kind of weird things. And I know here people care about security, so let's talk about computer security. Here is an email that I received. I wrote something about bemoaning the lack of security, and a colleague of mine, who is a well-known person in computer security, wrote me an email explaining to me why I have no idea what I'm talking about. That was politely what he was trying to tell me. He said, this is how it works. So this is very colloquial. This is the verbatim quote. First, somebody built a thing and it's super useful. Then eventually somebody else comes along and finds a vulnerability. Then security becomes part of the engineering process. Just like we need to make sure our code doesn't have bug, to make it crash, we need to make sure that our code doesn't have bug that can be exploited for our bad purposes. Turn the current for enough years, and eventually security gets better. He said, that's how it works. And he thought, this is okay, that's how it should work. And in fact, people have done surveys of free and open source software developer, and they say, yeah, I will do security at the end. But we now know one thing about doing security at the end. If you're doing security at the end, you don't have security. If you don't start building something and you say, first, start thinking about security, by the time you try to end it at the end, you can have security. The internet, they had the same idea. Internet was done with no security, or session layer, that's where we're going to add security. So we have today no insecure internet because of that. And so today we are, computer age is more than 75 years. The ENIAC was started, almost we're approaching 80 years now. ENIAC was started in 1946. And you can look at the milestone of accomplishment in computer science. Look at the Turing Award, the Nobel Prize in Computing. So what do we find? We find 4 Turing Awards in cryptography. But there is none in cybersecurity. So I once was very intrigued, and I went to people who serve on the committee and said, how come? And the answer was, what is the accomplishment in security that deserves a Turing Award other than cryptography? But everybody who understands security knows cryptography is an important part, but it's not the whole thing. We need to think much more broadly to get security. And now the lack of security is becoming, you know, we are hearing now almost daily about ransomware attacks. You know, hospitals being paralyzed by ransomware attacks. They have no choice, they are paying. More recently, pharmacies, pharmacy networks, they are being ransomware attacks. And you think that our community would say, we are in a crisis. I don't get this sense. Oh, well, okay. No security, what's the big deal? And in my opinion, part of this attitude comes from an attitude that is prevailing in computing, which I would call cyber libertarianism. Let's keep the government out. Regulation is bad for innovation. Keep the government out. But let's compare it to transportation, automobiles. 1908, Ford Model T rolls off the manufacturing line. Huge commercial success. And what do we discover very quickly? We discover very quickly that automobiles kills people. People get killed. So we've been spending now more than 100 years trying to make automobiles safer. And I just got a picture, let's see if it works, from a colleague of mine, Emil Paulson from Iceland. And he talked about automotive resilience. And there is a picture here. On the left, you see that Sweden already in 1915 had introduced a new innovation, a white line separating the left lane from the right lane on the road. Now we take it for granted. Somebody had to invent it. And this is an actual picture. He had an accident. You see the car is destroyed, but he had seatbelt, an airbag, and a shock-absorbing front. So he came out of it. The car is completely destroyed. He came out of it okay. This is an example of planned resilience. It didn't just happen. It happened because for over 100 years we've been thinking, how do we make automobiles safer? We've not been doing it. Nowhere near the same thing with security. And in my opinion, unless there's a society, and society means via government, we say, no, we have to mandate security. We have to figure out how to regulate. We have to be smart about it. It will not happen by itself. The companies have no incentive to do it. And so let's talk about economics, because that's a very important part of the equation. So we know now why we were not ready for the pandemic, because it costs money to get ready for a pandemic. Now, how much it costs not to be ready for the pandemic? I don't have a worldwide figure, but somebody did the calculation in the United States, and they look at both loss of life and loss of economic activity. And the answer was the cost of the pandemic was something around $3 trillion. Just imagine what we could have done getting ready for a pandemic with $10 billion, which is a drop in the bucket. And you go back to the history, it's quite amazing. February 27 of 2020, remember, in 2 weeks, the pandemic will explode on us. President Trump defined huge cut to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, cut to their budget, saying, well, when we need doctors, we can hire them. Why do we need them to pay them now? Of course, when you need them, it's too late to go and hire them. 2019, again, the Trump administration shut down the CDC. Which office? Vaccine Safety Office. Why spend so much money on vaccine safety? Just amazing. So let's dig a little bit into economic theory. So what do economists mean by efficiency? What they mean is that, here's the definition. This is from a website called Investopedia. It's a Wikipedia for investors. Economic efficiency means the goods and factor of production are distributed or allocated to the most valuable uses and waste is minimized. That's efficiency. And in fact, Investopedia goes on and said free market advocates argue that through individual self-interest and freedom of production as well as consumption. So after the financial crisis of 2008, I was very shaken by almost collapse of capitalism. So I went to economists and said, okay, teach me a little bit of economics. I asked, is there a theorem that says that capitalism is better than communism? We knew that communism was bad. I want to know that capitalism is good. And they tell me, go read the first welfare theorem. What is the first welfare theorem? Under center assumption, technical assumption, a free market will tend towards a competitive Pareto optimal equilibrium. Pareto optimal that no one can do a little better unless someone else does worse. And that's what they call efficiency. Pareto optimality is efficiency. Now the question, does it really serve the interests of society as a whole? So amazingly, this question was not asked by economists, but by computer scientists. Again, Christopher Papadimitriou, who loves to use what he called the computational lens, take computation and look at other areas of life. So in 1999, together with Koutsopias, he asked the following question. He looked at Nash equilibrium, the same thing holds for Pareto optimal equilibrium. He said there are many possible equilibria. Let's look at the best one in terms of social utility, total social utility, and compare it to the worst one. What is the gap? And they show the gap can be exponential. So they call it, this has become known as the price of anarchy. If no one guides the market, there's no guarantee it will end in the best equilibria. It could end up in the worst equilibria, and society is worse off. So just the fact that you have efficiency does not offer any guarantee for societal optimality. In fact, in a later paper, they ask, how long does it take to reach an equilibrium? And they show it may take exponential time to reach an equilibrium. If it takes so long, the answer is, we'll never reach an equilibrium because circumstances will change. You know, it will be the weather will change, some other things will change. So the whole idea that we're in equilibrium, we're never in equilibrium, and there's no optimality. And in fact, the economist, you know, is a very, it's called The Economist. It says there's been too much focus on equilibrium. So there's no efficiency and no optimality. But this is still standard economic theory. And in fact, this economic theory gives rise to an ideology. Some people call it market fundamentalism. The markets know best. And it's best characterized by there was a movie, 1987, called Wall Street. There is this character called Gordon Gekko, and he gave a fiery speech. And he said, greed, for lack of better word, is good. Greed is good. Why? He said, well, the invisible hand. Everybody can be greedy, and the result is society is better off. But if you know a little bit computer science, you know the greedy algorithms do not give us optimal results. This is something we teach students in basic course in algorithms. And so what happens here, for example, in cyber insecurity, there's simply no incentive for companies to invest in security. I mean, look at it. You buy a Windows machine. You buy a Windows machine. Then you have to buy extra some packages to add some security to your computer. Wait a minute. Why doesn't it come secure? Why do I have to buy additional level of security? Market failure. And I'll take another almost axiom of economics, free trade. This goes back to early 19th century. David Ricardo explained, you have two countries. One is better at making wool, and one is better at making cotton. They should focus on their core competency and trade with each other. Why? It's more efficient. And this is true. It's more efficient. But what do we know now? It's not resilient. Think what happened in Europe. It's very efficient to buy natural gas from Russia. It was very efficient. And now, how can Russia keep going in the war? Because Europe is buying its natural gas. Efficiency. Or think what happened now with semiconductors. Where is the vast majority of the capacity of semiconductor? Not just in one country. In the one country that's probably right now, after Ukraine, is the most dangerous geopolitical place in the world. And imagine what happens if suddenly we lose the semiconductor capacity of Taiwan. I mean, today, chips are more important than oil. How did we get there? Efficiencies, free trade. So we can go back to COVID-19 and say, okay, let's look at COVID-19, because something magical did happen in COVID-19. The two technologies did save us. Two technologies saved us. One, mRNA vaccines. We had a vaccine in about 1 year. When COVID started, I told people it's going to be 5 years, because it takes 5 years to develop the standard of developing a vaccine, which is creating weakened strain of the virus. You weaken it, you weaken it, you weaken it. It takes 5 years to do it. We had vaccine in about 1 year. It was magic. But equally important, we were able to go on with life because we virtualized everything. Immediately overnight, we switched to teaching virtually and learning virtually and working virtually and even visiting doctors virtually. How did it happen? How did we have the capacity suddenly to switch? In February of 2020, who heard of Zoom here? Who heard of Zoom in February 2020? How was Zoom able to suddenly support the whole world? And so the answer is there is very important, the most important principle of resiliency is redundancy. And this, in fact, we know this. You think about communication, error correcting code. How do they work? Redundancy. 1956, von Neumann write about the biological puzzle. Organisms, the cells are very unreliable. Organisms are fairly reliable. How does nature accomplish it? The answer is redundancy of cells. We have many cells to do the same function. And after the financial crisis of 2008, what are we telling banks? You must hold reserves, redundancy. Prepare for a disaster. And amazingly, we survived COVID because of the Cold War. Because we have very, very reliable communication, because if you go back to the 1960s, what was the strategic dilemma? The strategic dilemma is, if you don't have second strike between two nuclear powers, if you don't have second strike capability, it gives each one an incentive to strike first. So this is very unstable. And so each side wants to have ability for second strike. So one is, for example, the United States, we had the so-called the nuclear triad. We have ICBMs and bombers and submarines. So you have resilience there. But it's not enough to have the capacity for second strike. You have to have the command and communication capacity. The president has to be able to give the order. And I mean, you need very resilient communication system. And what are the principles? Redundancy and distributivity. So the whole packet switching network were invented to solve the resilience problem during the Cold War. And that's suddenly what saved us during COVID. So to summarize, resilience is a very fundamental but underappreciated societal need. We don't talk about it enough. And I think in computing we have to talk about it, in economics we have to talk about it. And we are fighting psychology because people are very bad at preparing for low probability event. If I tell you something will happen 1 in a million, oh, I can ignore it. 1 in a million, I'll ignore it. So I don't know here in Bulgaria, but in Texas, I have to renew my car registration every year. And to do that, I have to show to the state that my car is insured. The state is forcing me to insure my car. I don't get the sticker to put on my car unless I show the state I've insured my car. Now, why do we buy insurance? It's for resilience. So why is the state forcing me to do it? Because the state knows that buying insurance is inefficient. And if people wouldn't have to do it legally, they will save money and they will not buy insurance. So our society is very bad in planning for resilience. It requires societal action. We have to force ourselves because it goes against our nature. And we need to think, okay, we had this huge crisis of coronavirus. And an article in the New York Times, what if the coronavirus crisis is just a trial run? And we are already seeing a growing frequency of natural disaster. Even during COVID, there was a heat wave in the northwest of the United States. The north of the United States is usually very, very mild climate. They're not ready for heat. And they have massive heat wave. Hundreds of people died from heat. And in fact, the hospitals were more overwhelmed because of the heat wave than they were during COVID. And these natural disasters are happening. You know, we just have we have another hurricane just hit Louisiana. We'll see what happened. We were hit by a hurricane in July. A hurricane hit Houston, and many people lost power for almost 2 weeks. And July is a hot and humid month in Houston. To live without power, it's misery. I was very lucky. I only lost power for 36 hours. And we need to start thinking, you know, I think we went through this traumatic experience of COVID. Will we change? And I don't know what the answer is. People have been asking this question. Farid Zakaria in the Washington Post, the pandemic upended the present, giving us a chance to remake the future. Will we take advantage of it? Wired magazine, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought incalculable suffering and trauma. It offers ways for people and society to change for the better. Will we do it? Will AC after COVID be different than before COVID? People are skeptical. Wired magazine, from the fallen Champlain Tower, that was a high-rise residential built tower in Florida that collapsed, killed over 100 people, to climate change. Humans have yet to learn to avoid catastrophes they know are coming. So why is it so hard? I think this cartoon shows it in one cartoon. You see a rally, and the politicians say, who wants change? And you see everybody raise their hand. Everybody wants change. And then he says, okay, who wants to change? Nobody wants to change. This is our social challenge in a nutshell, in one cartoon. And so Kurt Vonnegut, a very famous science fiction writer, said, we'll go down in history. The first society would not save itself because it was not cost effective. Now here is the epilogue here. I gave this very talk in July 18 of 2024 in Berkeley, the Simon Institute in Berkeley. This happened on July 18. On July 19, a security company nobody heard of, CrowdStrike, pushed a faulty update, infected millions of Windows computers, brought down banks, airlines, business globally. The next day, the Washington Post. What's to blame for the CrowdStrike mess? Our drive for efficiency. New York Times, what happened to digital resilience? My email, and I gave the talk on July 18. This was just surreal coincidence. And I've gotten 100 emails. People are saying, what did you have to do? Did you have to give us a demo? Why did you do it? I had nothing to do with it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the microphone is going to come soon. So if you have questions, please, scream.
Speak up, speak up.
What's the solution?
We need to change. We need to change. And we need to change because we have no choice. Because if we don't change, we will simply not survive, okay? I mean, I just come from a NATO workshop. I'm in Bulgaria here because I just was 4 days in Varna for a NATO workshop on resilience, okay? And there was a panel, and people ask, what keeps you awake? What keeps you awake at night? And I said, the climate crisis, you know, it's just happening. And as a society, we have really not saying, okay, you know, when COVID happens, we did react. I mean, you know, in the United States, we invest billions of dollars developing a vaccine. We had to react because people were just dropping dead. But we're not good at dealing with slow change. Okay, you know, the proverbial frog, you know the story about the frog. It's in the water, yeah, it gets a little warmer. I'll get used to it, I'll get used to it. The world is getting, you know, we're seeing it in all kinds of things. You know, think of what's happening, you know, what's breaking Europe right now is immigration. This is what's happening right now with immigration is nothing if you suddenly have major droughts in Africa. People will be desperate. You know, it's their livelihood. They will be desperate. They'll be, you know, people are trying to save their life. It will be just, you have to imagine that nothing can stop people. When people are, this partly happening in the United States. People are coming from the south because the current conditions are not livable. So you build bigger walls, they'll dig under, they'll climb over. You know, these are desperate people. So if we don't change, we will not survive. Now, I'll ask you a question. How many people here are convinced that our current society, you can look at the past 1,000 years, okay? I would say other than, let's say, the Black Plague, we basically, societies continue to evolve, okay? It's evolved, it changed, but there was no, you know, we've managed for the past 1,000 years. How many people are confident that if we continue the way we are today, we will be here, we will just manage again the next 1,000 years? I'm not convinced at all.
But it was obvious in 2009 that nowadays social-economic model doesn't work anymore, but we didn't know it. I think that if we take any measures in this time, 2020, and wasn't happening.
Well, you know, I don't have a recipe for what we need to do, but I'm convinced that unless, and especially I'm talking here to the students here, because if you look at the way the world is today, the world today feels somewhat broken. And if you want to know why, I would say this is a pretty good explanation, because we are so focused on efficiency, we've lost resilience, we're already paying the price. And our whole value system is, you know, economics runs the world. And if you have a world that just focuses on efficiency, resilience goes down the drain. And so what we need is to start thinking, no, this cannot continue. And what we need is people who go back to do economics and says, okay, how come resilience does not show up in any of the economic theorems? What kind of economic theory that we have that used to run the world when it ignores resilience? So we need to change the way we're thinking. And again, right now, all I tell you, I want you to go back home and say, resilience is important. What do I do? How do I change my life? If there are students here, maybe someone will go do a PhD on resilient computing. Maybe someone will do a PhD on resilient economics. We need to change the way we think. Unless we change how we think, I'm not convinced we'll be here in 1,000 years. We've been here for a long time. You know, you can say human history, I mean, kind of in general sense, you can say about million years. So 1,000 years is a very, very short time. So suddenly to face the fact that we may not be here in 1,000 years, this is to me scary. And all this idea, oh, we'll go to Mars and we'll terraform Mars, this is science fiction. If we are going to fix Mars, why don't we fix Earth first? Why do we have to go to Mars to terraform Mars? And what will happen? We'll go to Mars and we'll trash Mars in another 1,000 years. Okay, where are we going to go then? Pluto?
Yeah, go ahead.
Speak up there. So the important, this is true for everything. No. The point is that, so you're asking about the trade-off. I cannot hear you very well. You're asking about the trade-off. I cannot hear you well, so a speech will not work. Okay, maybe you can give me a summary. Do you understand the basic question there? Okay, it's very hard to hear long speeches without a microphone. But the reason this is very challenging, and I think I got the gist of what you're saying, but I'm sorry I couldn't understand your question in detail. Because the trade-off here, it's not a clear trade-off. It's not that we can say, economy will say, okay, reduce everything to utility. This is what economists will tell you. There is this magical utility function. But it's not clear how you reduce everything to utility. It's just not true that everything we do, we reduce to utility. In life, we kind of, how do you navigate? For example, here is a fundamental trade-off we all have to deal with. Life, work, life, okay? It's more efficient to work more because you'll do more, you'll succeed more, you'll make more money. But we all also want to have a life. How do we navigate that balance? Economists will tell you, well, you're reducing everything to one number. But nobody thinks that way. One way we think is, well, yeah, I can make more money, but you know what, I'm okay now. I don't need more money. I want to have a ability to have a family, to spend time with my family. I'm okay. I don't want to spend less time with my family to make more money. I mean, about 10 years ago, a major tech corporations wanted to hire me. And there was some interesting aspect of the proposal, so we start talking. And I remember I told my wife at the beginning, I bet I can double my salary. And then we were talking more and more, realized that I was so naive. I could have quintupled my salary, times 5. And so, wow, now we're talking about real money. And then, at the end, I decided, as you may have noticed, I have opinions, and I like to express them. And I realized that if I go to industry, I will lose that. And I said, I don't want to do that. This is so important to me, I'm not willing to trade it for money. I have what I need, I have a car, I have a house, I'm okay, I get enough food, we're okay. I have pension fund, we're okay, I don't need more money. So the point is that you look at trade-off and you don't decide just by numerical thing. So, for example, take resilience. So how many people here would hesitate if they have to drive? How far is Varna from here? What's the distance to Varna? 200 kilometers.
No,
more. So how many people will hesitate to take the car and drive to somewhere on the Black Sea, let's say 200 kilometers? Nice vacation. Oh, sure, 200 kilometers, no big deal, right? 3-hour drive, no big deal. Listen, 2.5 hours drive, you do that. Turns out that when you drive 200 kilometers, your risk of dying is about 1 in a million. I've calculated it. It's about 1 in a million. Even if I told you that, you're still going to drive. And you say, well, I'm willing to take that risk. So the answer is, we're willing to take some risk. If I told you it's going to be 1 in 10,000, you say, no way, I'm not going to do it. So we somehow use actually not our head to make this decision, we use our gut to make this decision. But we're thinking about it. We buy insurance. I have, for example, car insurance, the state forces me to buy. But home insurance, the state does not force me to buy. But the house is my biggest investment in my life, okay? It's a huge investment. It's my biggest asset. So I spend money on home insurance because I think what will happen if the house goes on fire doesn't seem completely far-fetched. And I said, okay, I'll invest in insurance. So there's no formula how to navigate this trade-off, okay? We will have to decide, and part of the decision, it's one thing to say, okay, I have a probability 1 in a million that I will die, okay? What if the probability 1 in a million that everybody in Sofia will die? Wow, you say, wait a minute, this is now we're talking about something much more catastrophic than one person dying. What if we talk about the possibility that the human society goes extinct? This is something that we have to take extremely seriously. So the answer is, there's no formula that will tell you how to navigate this trade-off. As a society, it's a conversation and thinking that we must engage in. We must enrich our vocabulary. It's just not part of our vocabulary. So I said I had a hard time hearing the questions. I'm not sure I answered the question, but there is, I recently read actually a beautiful quote for an economist, a US economist. It says, there are no perfect solutions in life. Everything is a trade-off. There is a mic. I refuse to take question without mic now. I will not take question without mic because I cannot hear them. No, give the mic to someone else. I'm sorry. Someone should not monopolize the conversation.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So you were talking a lot about economics, because some people say politics and economics are two sides of the same coin. What about the resilience in politics?
In?
Politics.
So that's a very interesting question. I mean, when you prepare a talk, it's like making a movie, and there are pieces that's what's called left on the editing floor. Because people are asking that. And one debate, for example, comes about democracy versus dictatorship. And you kind of see the same thing. The dictatorship is more efficient. So part of you look at United States, and we are polarized, we are debating, it's very hard to make decisions. In China, Xi Jinping says, that's the way it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be. It's very efficient. On the other hand, the risk of Xi Jinping making one wrong decision with catastrophic effects is much, much higher. So political scientists would kind of make a similar argument. The democracy is less efficient, but it is more resilient. But even when the decisions are made, usually people have they accept the decision better than if there is a better chance they would follow the decision that was accepted democratically. Not always. I mean, we saw that, We are looking now at deterioration of democracy, and that's an interesting question, what happened. But generally, the political scientists would argue the same, that it's the same tension between efficiency and resilience also throughout in political systems.
More questions? There's a question there.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question. And,
Hold the mic close to your mouth.
Is it clear?
I'll tell you the rule. It has to be so close that you feel uncomfortable.
Okay, now is it
No, close.
closer?
You have to feel uncomfortable, then it's good.
Okay.
Yes.
So I wanted to, by asking this question, I want to understand your point of view of the subject that I'm going to describe. So before 1800s, human life and humanity was all about resilience and redundancy. And we moved on from that after the Industrial Revolution. And after that, we tried to increase the efficiency in our lives. So why do you think that going back to increasing the resilience and redundancy is going to help us by the fact that after the Industrial Revolution, humanity, I can say, evolved much more, and now we are more advanced. And my second question is that we don't have enough resources, so how we are going to implement redundancy, for example, in healthcare, in, for example, foods and supply chains, and a lot of things like that.
So first, I disagree with your analysis. If you look at human history, it always has been about efficiency. Why? Think about it. Go back to primitive humans. If you don't, you go 3 days without food, you die. Okay? You don't find water today, you die. So nobody worried about what will happen when I get old. That was not a worry. The worry was, will I still be alive next week? So evolution forces us to focus on on efficiency. I have to survive today. I have to survive tomorrow, okay? And even you look at, what was the advantage of agriculture? Partly was, it will give us easier to make food. And then population started growing. And then people start thinking, look at the biblical story of Joseph and Pharaoh and Joseph, right? What is Joseph's solution? It's going to be a drought, going to be famine. What is our solution? We'll use the good time, create redundancy, so we can survive the bad times. This is the first, I know, kind of story in mythology of the value of redundancy shows up for resilience. That's how you get resilience, is via redundancy. But that's, that was an original concept. We are going to save. Before, the people did not save. At most you had enough money to pass the winter, but not beyond that. Nobody thought of how do I save for the future. So, and if you look at economic development over the years, it was always by more and more efficiency. The invention of the plow, and then industry. Everything was by efficiency. So the reason it's hard for us to think about resilience, because we never done it. We've been spending the last million years thinking about efficiency. But partly because of that, we have now come to the point that we are kind of exhausting the earth. Carbon-based energy has given us amazing, just because we have energy is relatively cheap. Just compare life the way it is today, the way it used to be before the Industrial Revolution. It's all because of cheap energy. But now we understand the consequences of this. So we are forced, if we want to stay here, we have to reevaluate this. We've never seriously done it. When we use redundancy, it's okay, error correcting code, bank reserve. We have not looked at society overall and says, okay, how do we strike a balance there? So the reason it's so hard to think about resilience, because until now, we never had to do it. You focus on efficiency, let nature take care of genetic diversity, and it gave us a good way to accomplish it, so what the heck, why not? Okay, nobody's protesting. But we didn't have to worry about resilience. There are a few areas in life where we do. Think about it. There are certain areas in life where we do. What is the most important one? Military. We have discovered that we live, in some sense, we thought it has changed, but apparently not much has changed, that in our personal life within a country, we have the law to regulate violence. But between countries, if you want more resources, what do? You just take it from someone else. And so this is the way it has been in human history, apparently even still going on today. So countries realize, unless we have military, we invest in military, it's a waste of money to invest in military, unless there is a war. Unless we invest in military, we are at risk. So this is the one big area, and still, how much to invest in the military? This is part of the debate. NATO, how much should they spend on defense? What percentage of their GDP they should invest in defense? And you talk to, in this workshop I attended to, there are people from the military, and they go to the government, say, the military needs more money, and we don't want to give you more money. You're already very expensive. You're doing nothing. We don't expect Bulgaria to be attacked. Why should we spend more money on the military? So this is the ongoing tensions. The military is a place where we say we're going to invest in resilience, because this is exactly what military give you, resilience. And we've kind of done the same in some sense. If you think about, we invest in fire department. We say risk of fire. So even though the fireman most of the time sits there and do nothing, and it's very expensive to maintain them, most of the time you pay them to do nothing. But we know that when you want them to come very, very quickly. So you need extra capacity. So we're willing to spend the money. Somehow experience has told us, yes, it's inefficient to have a fire department, but try to do it without fire department. Try to have a country without a military. So we need to take that kind of thinking and broaden it and what partly we need is imagination. What can go wrong? When things are going well, you don't need to worry about resilience. The pandemic was an example. There were plenty of warnings. We did not sit down to do it seriously. Okay, if there is a pandemic, what will happen? How do we get ready? We didn't do it, and we paid a very, very high price for it.
How do you measure resilience? How do we
So one of the things that we don't have is exactly tools to do it, because we have just never really took it, we have lots of tools to think about efficiency. So one of the things is, for example, my idea was that if we want to look at societal resilience, who can think about it? Take science fiction writers, have a convention of science fiction writers, and ask them to think about terrible scenarios. What can go wrong? And, some of them we will dismiss and say, okay, what is it? This is, who wrote this one? There was a famous radio show about the Martian invading the Earth, okay? And we'll dismiss the little green man invading us. But some scenarios we will take seriously, and we'll say, okay, let's try to have some estimates. What are the likelihood? What are the consequences? Is it just property damage? Even property damage, by the time it's very, very large, a whole economy destroyed. It's a big thing. People die because of economic damage. We need to start doing resilience planning. And I said, there are some areas of your life where you do it, okay? If you have a house, I bet you have home insurance policy, because you thought the consequences of not having it are just too severe. But we don't have, and we do it for military, because we know the consequences are too severe. But we don't have economic theory. I would love to go to the economics department and talk about efficiency. I'd love to take an economic theory about economic theory of resilience. There is none. It's a huge gap. So I don't have answer because we don't have the answer. We need to start taking it seriously so we can come up with the answer to that. You're asking lots of questions to which I don't have the answers. But my response is, we need to start taking it seriously to develop answers, because these questions are of primary importance to the future of humanity.
Okay, one last question. Somebody has something? Yeah, there is a...
Wait for the mic, wait for the mic. Mic. It's efficient to talk without a mic, but I cannot hear you, so it's not resilient.
Thank you for your time. Just a quick survey. Free will versus determinism. What's your take?
What was the thing?
What's your take on free will versus determinism?
Oh. Let me reply with another question. Why does the universe exist? Okay? Since you want to do deep philosophy. So the best I know about, I tell you my take about free will, and I'm not an expert on free will, is that it's very hard to argue philosophically and naturally that free will exists. On the other hand, it's what I would call incredibly useful, it's a very useful illusion. To say, if I tell you, we're all just automata, okay? Don't worry about it. Psychologists have done experiments. They take two groups of students and they give them lectures. One lecturing them, there is free will. They come up with some reasoning why there is free will. To the other group, they say there's no free will, totally deterministic. And then they have some experiment by which they have to make decisions helping other people. And turn out the people who believe in free will are much more helpful to other people, because they think, okay, I can choose to be good and do something, even if it costs me some money. So it turned out that believing in free will is very good for society. I mean, it's a little, you can take other things, our ethics, okay? Do you believe in things that are inherently good? You could say, well, the universe doesn't care about good and bad, okay? Somebody dies. Well, people die, cockroaches die, monkeys die, people die. What's bad about people dying? Other than that we feel a little pain when somebody close to us die. But imagine what kind of life we would have if we say, no, there's no good or evil. Nature is neutral, we don't care about good and evil. What kind of life would we have? So I said there are useful illusions. So the same way people ask about free will, I would say, is good and evil inherent concept? And the answer is really, it's hard, I have a hard time arguing that they are, because really nature couldn't care less about good and evil. Does humanity exist or doesn't exist? Nature doesn't care. It has lots of planets. Who knows? It doesn't, we're just a little speck somewhere in a small a solar system of a non-significant star in a non-significant galaxy. okay, in a non-significant galaxy cluster. But imagine what our life would be if we said, oh, no, there's, you know, we are, what is it called? We just deny any value or anything like that. So these are all very, very useful illusions. Now, of course, we argue, okay? You know, do you believe in God? Some people say that's another useful illusion, okay? I have a hard time convincing myself that it's useful. So we can continue to debate philosophy, but there are many, many useful illusions.
Okay, I think let's wrap up. And are there any
Ask me about how did the universe start?